great.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Nice and sunny.
Yes, you too. It's a rarity here these days, but it's cold, but at least it's bright. Your hair looks really nice.
Nice, thank you.
It's different from last time.
Thank you. My nephew did it.
Oh yeah? Good job.
He's very talented.
Looks great.
Thank you.
So, how do you make sense of what's going on in the world right now? I mean, particularly in the States, which it seems to affect. This seems to be the starting point for a lot of things on the planet. What's your understanding of it all?
Well, understanding is quite a word, really. So one of the things, Carlos Castaneda's colleague, Carol Teagues, talks a lot about understanding. Let's get our feet on the ground and see where we are. And that's the first response is getting centered with oneself. And of course, we're always in relationship. Well, I'll talk about that too. Tensegrity is all about relationship. Tensegrity being the modern version that Carlos brought out of Don Juan's teachings. His teacher, Don Juan Matus. We can get, there's a lot of different possible responses. You could get very off-center. One could get very ungrounded, spin out, exhausted, angry, judgmental. There's other responses that are pretty exciting to witness. Externally, people getting together. You saw this mass worldwide protest the day after the inauguration, but it wasn't all protest. That was really exciting for me to see. Because when you protest something, if we really look at the art of dreaming, which is the core of one of the things that this lineage practices, if we're going against something and it's all this focused against, you're just giving energy to it and you're nourishing it in a strange way. You're feeding it, you're strengthening it. And so very easy to, we have a really, really, really easy opportunity to just go into some major judgment and polarization and, feeling even, we can get into victimhood or wanting to be, a villain in some way or so one of the things that we're looking at, and it's a very, very clear opportunity, is if we have judgments, and they're going to be brought up right now. I had a lot of judgments brought up, and then I have to look. And one of the things that we practice as tensegrity practitioners, change the pronoun. For example, he is an idiot, or he is a dangerous narcissist. Change the pronoun and see what it looks like if I try on, I am an idiot. I am a dangerous narcissist. All right, well, there are plenty of times that I can be an idiot, that I have acted in a way of something I'd call an idiot. Idiot comes from the Greek, somebody who's not tied in to the culture. Right? Isn't it the exile is the idiot, right? Or someone who doesn't participate in the state?
I don't remember, but I know the id is got, identity has got to with idiot.
Well, idiotes, I thought, anyway, it's like, hey, narcissist is somebody that's focused on themselves, right? I'm not a psychotherapist. I can't get into a clinical description of narcissism, but that's the malaise that Don Juan was talking about with the human condition, early on, that we as a culture are centered on me, and everything ties back to me. How does this reflect on me? How many people came to my party? Have I ever been obsessed with that? How many people liked that posting that I did? How many people came to the event? And that is a reflection on my worth and my value. Have I ever participated in that? You bet. You know? So it's an opportunity to really get to know yourself a little better. And not to judge yourself there either. It's not only finding our limitations, our flaws, but if we're not conscious of those, how are we going to move forward? We're moving blind, and we're just externalizing the whole thing. And it's this party, or it's that person, or change the pronoun, you know. And it also gets into the level of, you know, a lot of people, I'm going to stay impersonal with this part, have family members who they know voted for the current president, you know, and you could get into, that could be very polarizing, or it could be an opportunity, you know, take a breath, you know, exhale. What is their thinking? Let's pause. Don't judge it. If we're going back to the art of dreaming, that's being able to try on different perspectives, look at things from different points of view, without going nuts, without judging. That takes practice, and it takes a deliberate practice, a deliberate intention. And, you know, I've been lucky that I don't really get away with trying to, it's not viable, you know, in my day-to-day world. It doesn't mean that I don't try sometimes, but this is a special case. You've got to understand that she's doing this, or they really know it's their fault, you know. And with seminars and classes that we give, you know, we will take those situations and play them out. And ultimately, a lot of times it ends with laughter, because we can laugh, you know, in some way at the comedy and the theater, and then kind of get reconnected. Okay, what decision do I want to make now with this more conscious stance? So I think that's a beginning of, does that start to answer? Does that answer?
Yeah, and I guess there's also another level too, isn't there, where there's the overall philosophy of what's going on. I mean, if the fact that we live in a series of edifices, both personally
Yes.
and also on a mass scale. I mean,
Yes,
this is an edifice, right? That there's a structure that we are in that we have to deal with. So I guess that also helps. Within it, I guess individually we have to figure out our own little place in it, whether we're just projecting all of our identity onto everything else. But then
Yes.
I guess you have to also bring in that overall picture. Is that also part of the theater of infinity to present the overall picture, or is it more of the gut experience of it all?
Well, I think it's all of it. What do you mean by the gut experience of it all?
Well, what I mean by that is that examining your own responses, right? Like I think that what's cool about this whole Trump thing is that all there's so much self-righteousness that's being exposed, which is great. I mean, it's rather than attacking it, it's an opportunity for all the people that feel like they're the good guy to see themselves acting like the bad guy, right?
Yeah, and who's good and who's bad,
Exactly.
ultimately, really.
Right.
But and theater of infinity, okay, we can play all the parts. The people that, you know, we consider to be the great actors are the ones that almost disappear into the part. You know, a lot of times you might watch Meryl Streep and you forgot that it was Meryl Streep, or you forgot that it was Brad Pitt, or whoever it is, you know. That's pretty awesome and amazing. And I'm sure there's other people that might not even be stars or famous because they're so good at, you know, when they play their part. And really being willing to have the flexibility just to pause and go into that other perspective. So in the theater of infinity, if you're playing a scene, you know, at the office where, you know, somebody missed a deadline on posting something or whatever it was, what's your part? Okay, you know, you might start out with, I'm playing, you know, if it's me blaming somebody, I'll play me. You know, I'll see what I do with my physical form. And then I'll shift, I'll do a breath, I'll do a tensegrity movement, get centered, find my feet. Then see what I see, and my perspective might shift. then I'm going to play the person that I'm arguing with. Try on that part. That's one aspect. What I really enjoy also, you can try this on another way. One of the ways that we can look at dreaming, sometimes we'll be looking at a dream. You can take a dream scene and do some similar things with it. What if you take everybody in the dream as you for a moment? And we can all play all the parts. And this idea, we can play that, hey, we've got the right philosophy, just in the political scenario. Those people are wrong. They're ignorant. The truth is, I'm not an expert, in how the political system works. And that's part of the, we have, I think, collectively lost touch, lost interest. We have a part in the thing sliding or moving or doing whatever it's doing, where it's going right now. I would say, if we're honest with ourselves, hey, this is a really great wake-up call for anybody involved, whatever your perspective is. Get to know how the system that you've taken for granted, how does it work? What can you do within it? How would you want to evolve it in that bigger picture? And then on your local picture, what are you doing with the leadership there? Are you just commenting and letting somebody else take the hits? Are you just like, I don't want to deal with it, and letting letting it take a direction that then you can just complain about? Or do we get involved in some way? And it's not about getting involved like correcting everybody. But if Carlos Castaneda really believed that the individual consciousness works as a field, like consciousness is a field. So one person's greater consciousness, that's now in the field, accessible to all human. Don Juan would say awareness is an environment. It's an environment. So it really does matter, if we walk into the grocery store kind of grumpy and trying to push the other person out of the way, versus I'm so grateful for this abundance, or whatever mood. And you have those days, right, where maybe I can say, where I'm making the effort, but it's a little, I'm really wanting to judge me grumpy, and other days more connected and working well with other people. And you walk in the store and everybody's smiling at you and you're smiling at them, and we're having a conversation, talking about which one of those crackers is really good. That makes a difference. That could change a whole trajectory of something that an individual, or the way people are working together. So does that?
Yeah. I find that for myself, as I become more open to everything, I become less interested in the details of. I would never be interested in politics or any of that stuff, even though I go along with the whole voting thing just because I want to participate. But I don't know how you feel about it yourself, but I think that that part of that, I don't know. It seems almost that it's a whole paradigm that even to be caught in it at all means to be caught in a dialectic. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I do. And there's this woman, Deborah Tannen, who talks about communication and how we want to make every story like there's two sides to a story. And you saw that in this past election in the United States, what people we created a false equivalency. Well, there's this and there's this. And who said that the reality is like a pancake? I think that was her question and other people's question. And then we want, another related thing is the truth. And if going back to the art of dreaming, if we're going to everybody likes to look at the elephant, and, you have that great story of somebody who's standing at the tail has a totally description, and somebody who's standing at the front. And if you want to argue about it, it's insane. Right. There are many perspectives. There are many ways to look at things. we but what's interesting, if we just want to use the election as an example, is it wasn't quite so black, white, A, B. There was somebody who possibly even could have been a third party candidate that went through the Democratic Party, who got a lot of traction, who had a different view and a different way of approaching things, and that was taken much more seriously than it would have been 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I think people, yeah, and so yes, if you choose to get into polarity and dichotomy, so to me, just ignoring it all, I'm not so sure about that either.
I wouldn't say ignoring, but you know, it kind of leads on to something else I was going to bring up later, because I know you're into astrology, and various, obviously.
How you know this?
It must have been from your website. I'm not sure. But 2012, was 2012 a pivotal year in your understanding, both as a practitioner of tensegrity and dreaming and as an astrologer?
It was, to me, in the sense that we all got into what was exciting about it. And I'm not an expert on the Mayan calendar by any means. And there's different interpretations of when there was a turn or a shift. But there seemed to be an agreement that it's time to raise our vibration, And this lineage talks about how we're vibratory beings. If we really take our understanding of science and physics and apply it to our daily world, which is one of the things that Carlos was really interested in, that we're really interested in, is take it out of just a theoretical and take it into day to day. We're vibratory beings, and there was a large agreement that it's time to shift that vibration. That, to me, is the biggest, the most relevant aspect of that. I didn't try to take on analyzing that astrologically because it's going through the Mayan system. And that's a whole realm, membership that there's experts in, that I talked to a few people that talk to them. And, one of the things that I hear is we are, just by our position in the galaxy and the way that we're moving, we are moving into an age of greater awareness. Right. So from that perspective, that's helpful, because we're not getting into, we could get into doom and gloom. It's all over. We're going down. Some things might be over and they might be going down, but our awareness doesn't have to go down, and that's everything, Right. For this lineage, we talk about awareness. That's the key. Are we learning something? And that's what you take forward. That's the seed of light that we take forward into the next moment or the next era. So to me, we got a huge vibrational contrast going on right now. And you could get pulled into a vortex of negativity, or you could get inspired to really get your feet on the ground in terms of what are you contributing in life? What are you doing? Why are you here? You hear a lot of people right now say, well, this is it. This is the year 2017. Be on purpose. It's every moment is that time, but it sure does bring in a sense of urgency now. And that can be super productive. That can be very helpful urgency. We don't always do so well under conditions when we think we have eternity, which is a fantasy. But that's another thing that, that we talk about. A lot of times we do better under those circumstances of pressure. And when we look at this lineage and history with ancient Mexico, but this lineage that tensegrity comes out of, the conquest was a major event in the knowledge of this line of seers. Because they were very focused on doing things in the realm of dreaming with what we call the dreaming body or the energy body, and facing, what they call the allies. And they became very expert, and they just said, forget about the other human beings, or we don't need to worry about them. And got clobbered, most of them, by other human beings called the conquest, and also battles and wars that took place before the conquest. They didn't know how to deal with other human beings. And that's really a huge missed opportunity. And they saw that. They kind of, the ones that survived kind of gathered their intelligence and reassessed and started anew. And it's like, we're going to deal with the daily world. Through doing that, they really reached some new conclusions, some new perceptions. So here we are. It's another turn of the wheel.
And it seems that one of the things that came out of that initial thing you were mentioning was a covertness that seems to be turning into overtness with the books. And the reason why I brought up 2012 is because I've been speaking to a couple of people that one person in particular that really studies that whole thing through many cultures, that 2012 was a pivotal moment for all the calendars, the Mayan calendar, the Egyptian calendars, all these calendars.
Really?
And he was saying that what it is that it's the reconciliation of dialectics that and all these calendars show that we've been playing in these dialectics and these paradigms. Every paradigm has got its own dialectic that we've been bouncing around in, and that now is the time that these dialectics have to be resolved, reconciled, and the energy is there to do it. And Michael Krellman is saying the same thing from his travels, that we are actually in the galactic ray, that the central sun of the galaxy, we've moved into with the physical reality. And now that we're this ray, that the lines between all the different density levels. There's something else that Don Juan didn't talk about or Carlos, it sounds like, didn't talk about density levels. Was he aware of density levels, or did he refer them to as that, or was?
What do you mean by density levels?
Well, you see, this is just something that's kind of new for me too, and this is why I want to mention Michael Krellman, is because he's been offering a whole lot of information, sort of that is along Carlos's information and into other directions, where he talks about density levels, third density level, that humanity is coming out of the third density level into the fourth and fifth. That the third is that certainty of physicality, the fight, flight, no sense of spirit, just the physical reality and certainty of our physicalness, and that the fourth density level is when the idea of spirit comes into consciousness, into awareness, and that humanity is now that the third level densities is really fighting with itself and to maintain itself. Anyways, it's another understanding of what's going on and the reconciliation that needs to take place, it sounds like, from many points of view. And that's why I wanted to bring up the 2012 thing in regards to what we were originally talking about. With all this stuff going on, that just seems to be all this polarity that you're mentioning, battling, right? And now it's confusing. Like you said, who's good and who's bad anymore, right? I mean, like, not that it was clear. Sorry, go ahead.
But just if we perceive energy, there is no good and bad.
Right, but there's conflict.
Definitely.
Right.
And there can be polarity. We can get it. We definitely want to get out of. Carlos would talk about binary thought, binary thinking. It can be useful if it can lead to a third area. He didn't talk about density levels per se. I mean, there might be things that we could describe as parallel. He would talk about the stages of a being of knowledge, and we have to encounter our fear. The first thing is we are afraid. We don't really want to know, and we could take these as linear stages through life, or we could take these as stages that we encounter
momentarily.
Cyclically, or fear and clarity. Okay, we've stepped beyond the fear just to look over, look at some things and maybe look at some of our own patterns, look at some of the assumptions that we have. That enables us to better see others' assumptions and things like that. And then we could get very righteous about that. It's clear. I've got the right way. I saw it. You don't see it. You're an idiot. I'm enlightened. You can get stuck there. Then the next phase he talked about is power. If you can get past that clarity where you want to get fixed in one place, and he would say, in a way, we want to just get get the solution and then rest. But this is a dynamic, universe, and energy is always moving. It's changing. There are certain patterns that we can see in structures, but it's always evolving also. So that clarity is going to be temporary. There's going to be very few things that we can say with certainty. He said there was like a handful of things that they would claim as certain, and we could get into that. One is that we're beings that are going to die. We don't have forever. We have this moment. So what do you want to do with it? That could give us tremendous power if we take it that way. And then the next enemy that he would say, or the next thing that you've got to handle, we don't necessarily have to make it, is power. You have dealt with your fear. You might have overcome the need to have this absolute certainty. So then you've got a certain amount of power. You've gathered energy. You've gathered experience. You could get stuck there. You want to have power over other people. And that might be where the ancient seers of this lineage got stuck. They thought they had a lot of power. They could maneuver and manipulate things, but they didn't put in their calculations certain, they didn't account for everything. You can get caught in that in a lot of different ways. Why did you do that? Because I can, because I could, or you don't think that you have to check things out, So, and then he'd say the last one's old age, and we can't conquer that one. We can just hold it off, right. And what holds it off is that curiosity, that sense of play. And that's we have to be really careful right now. And I'm just saying this to myself as much as anybody else, can lose your sense of play. It's like, well, and it's not to make light of some of the things that are going on, And I told a friend of mine, I'm seeing, you see somebody his brother didn't land at the airport because there's suddenly a ban on immigration, and they're in tears. That's heartbreaking to see things like that, and it's not something, if I look at myself, I'm like, wow, that's my country doing that. Well, what has my country been doing, for decades, and were we really that interested? Now it's kind of come up right here, to be examined. And again, I have to go back to, okay, where have I just totally not welcomed somebody just because I'm dismissive, or it's an arbitrary categorization I'm making, because it's really arbitrary what's going on. But we're very arbitrary sometimes in what we'll pay attention to and what we won't. And what you give your attention to, it's been said in many different traditions, and that's where your energy goes, and that's ultimately where your experience is going to go. So if we're going against, we're just giving energy to that experience of struggle. So what do we want to create? What is the vision? Where do we want to go collectively? And that starts also, where do you want to go individually? What do I want to contribute? How do I want to live? What do I want to experience? I think it's really a call, if you're looking to learn, it's a real call for us all also to get into that silence and step away as much as we can from the assumptions and reconnect with ourselves, reconnect with that essential part of us, but also, like I said, play. We could lose that. Our essence has play in it. I mean, look at children, look at little animal, the little young beings. Yeah. They want to play, and we want to get, right now we're in a situation we can get very tight. We can lose that, yeah. And that means you lose. Play is in a way how we dream stuff. It's how we, what you play as a child, you're practicing for that beautiful dream that you want to live. If you lose that, you're losing, in a way, the evolution. You're carrying the new thing forward.
Right. Play is just another word for it, that anything goes, right? Which means anything is possible, isn't it? I mean, isn't it just the joy of possibility?
It's the joy of possibility, and when you look at play, it has that possibility. We don't have to control the wave of energy, and by the way, we can't, right? But we can certainly align with it and let it play with us, and we play with it and play with others. You know, we play music. We don't work music. I might have mentioned that before when we talk, but it really helps me remember what's it all about. Because in my personal story, it's like we're going to get really serious and we're going to get really competitive, and if we're not first chair, we're a loser. And it's just like, oh my gosh, you lost the point.
Right.
It's the beauty. It's the play. It's the other musicians. Okay, if the bassoon's playing this, how do I want to play that on the flute, and hearing the drums and the rhythm, and that's play. Yeah. So, gosh, you know, there's so much diversity of view, of experience, of interest. Can we focus there? And that's really encouraging, because I think collectively there are a lot of people focusing there that maybe wouldn't have before. Right. And embracing it and learning more about who their neighbors are and all of that. Right.
Well, I guess it's a sign of being locked in the dialectic, how far we do have to see the opposite to see where we want to be still.
Yeah. It's context. Yeah. And there's no context. And this is the enjoyable, you know, I talk about this lineage, and there was a time when they call it the new seers, really had to regroup. They started to really systematically review their lives, and they saw, you know, it's through interaction that's one of the major ways that we grow. It's also on so many different levels. It can be through the conflict, it can be through agreement, it can be through just slightly different views or very different views. Right. But you get a context, and helps you decide, okay, what are you doing? What do you value? Who are you? You know?
Yeah. And what do I identify myself with? Right? Because it seems that like you were saying, like when you say my country, right? It's like is it your country? You know what I mean? I mean, obviously you're shaped by the culture that you're in. I mean, I notice it, because I notice always a slight difference to Americans to me, because I'm Canadian. There's always a slight difference, and I see it. You know, so there's a culture. Culture is a real thing. It does shape us in some subtle ways that you notice. But are we locked into that? In other words, is my country me? Am I responsible for what my country does emotionally? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Right? I guess it's another way. How do we give away our attention?
Yeah, and ultimately, there's a reason that the John Lennon song is such an iconic classic song. Imagine there's no countries, you know, imagine there's no borders, because the earth, if you look at the earth, and I got to see your interview with Edgar Mitchell, you know, who had that moment of great insight or perception of seeing the earth from space. It changed his whole life. Yeah. It's not divided up into borders, you know, and so it's a great opportunity now. What do we share? Yeah. What do we value together? Yeah. And getting past, well, I can't talk to you because I'm an American, you know.
Right. And there's such beauty in his humbleness, and everybody's humbleness. The one thing that I always do appreciate is the humility that I'll get from people, because I'm pretty sensitive to who I'm talking to, and for a guy like that, really, who's in his world, he's accomplished so much, right? In his world, you know, but there's such humility at his core that it's the beauty of him. I mean, we couldn't always relate to some concepts that I was talking with him about, but at the other core, the core of his being, he's such a humble guy that usually people with those perspectives of grand perspective have a deeply ingrained humility that is very beautiful. I mean, I understand why now everybody talks about humility in all the disciplines, because it seems to be what gets honed as you open yourself up to everything.
Well, and when you talk about that, I'm just getting the image. Like if we're really focused, me, and how I look and how I come across, you know, one of the things that Carlos is talking about, he's looking at philosophy and the way we frame our experience through time and history, and the phenomenologist, you know, looking at direct experience, being very direct. If you're caught in a lot of prejudgment, if you're caught in your idea of yourself, all of those things, you're blocking the view. Basically, you'll miss the beauty, you'll miss the dream. So we want to get out of our own way. We can get in our. It's a real handicap, you know, and that we do need a sense of self, right? When you said, what do you identify with? We need something, you know, to help us move forward in that sense. It's not that the sense of self is bad,
right.
But if that's where you're absorbed, it's just a never-ending, a bottomless pit, ultimately, of need that's never going to get fulfilled. Right. And easy to say, okay, so when we get into those places where we start feeling, you know, oh, they left me out, they're having a meeting without me, I didn't get invited to that party, we can start to spin, or they're ruining everything, you know. But usually about, you know, if I'm not, or somebody's not validating what we have decided is our claim to fame, so to speak, you know. Right. Somebody's not validating. If somebody has got the idea that their value is their beauty, right, and it's not validated, you know, they can go to pieces, or we could, you know, have that mobility. It isn't about that, you know, but Carlos would look at it's subject-object. We want to turn everything into subject-object. Are they looking at me, or I'm looking at them, and that's not pleasing me? You know, we can just using it as a way to look at it. You know, people would, well, why aren't you going to vote for this or that kind of? Well, I don't like them. I just like that one. That's really letting the me get in the way, right, of any kind of curiosity, any kind of discovery, right, any kind of looking at how things relate to each other at that deeper level. And that's why Don Juan would take Carlos out into nature. Because then when you're in nature, and you know, that's what we want to do, connect with nature. Does it mean that you have to live out isolated? No, but nature's all around. You know, this form is nature. This is a natural being. But it's really a lot harder to, you know, be in nature. You really can't be in nature with that point of view. You're going to end up destroying or not surviving, probably. But it's just all interrelated, and it's all cyclic. There's seasons for things and all that. And he wanted to get us out of that kind of urbanite blindness, which also tends to make us isolated, and we get into, okay, I'm not going to really connect with experience, and I'm only going to talk to people who agree with me, more or less, and I'm only going to get news that kind of validates what I already thought. It's not working. It doesn't seem to be working right now on a collective level. So then that asks us to check, well, is it working on an individual level? The prognosis right now looks like no, that's not working. It has some advantages, certain things you can do with it, but no. So we could call it humility, but it could be just being present. If you're really aware of all the aspects, you can't start to assert yourself as the greatest ever. If you're really aware of seasons and start looking at, okay, natural cycles, how people respond to it, how the animals respond, you start getting interested in that, you can't really be at the center of it.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And that's where the beauty of the humility comes, because there's the being that accepts their part amongst the whole without being the center. It sucks the perspective out of you that you're a part of a beautiful whole in a way. You can't sort of. I think it takes a pretty contracted being not to get pulled by the force of nature. I can see why that people use that as a way to bring out that perspective.
It's also bringing a greater consciousness than just the human perspective. And of course, there's different human perspectives, but we have a human form. We perceive in a specific way. We've got bicameral vision. We're bipedal. Our inner organs are exposed. We stand upright, and these are perceiving organs in this lineage. They have a primary function, but they also have secondary function, and they're exposed out this way. There's a lot of great possibilities with that. It's not the only perspective, and it's not the majority perspective. Right. It's one of many. Right. And so if we get out of this idea that, I am looking upon nature and measuring it according to my terms and my perception, and start getting curious about different perspectives, a dragonfly is going to actually, just its visual sense, is going to be completely different than a human. A bird is, it's going to see things, doesn't have the bicameral view. And we have, in this lineage, we have movements that will allow you to get a little taste of that. You can't be bombastic and say, oh, I did the bird form and now I know what a bird perceives, but you got a little taste, so you're not quite so invested in this one perspective as the center. Right. And the same thing with, in the human world, with language and culture. That's why Carlos would really encourage students to study study another language, study other cultures. He was studying anthropology. So you get off the certainty. And at the same time, you don't presume to be able to participate in the culture as a native would. You don't have that experience. So that's humbleness. If you want, you could call that humbleness also, but it's sobriety. Because it's true, That's a fact. And that he would say that about his encounter with Don Juan. I don't have membership into his world. So he was continuously working to bridge the Western thought with what Don Juan was doing, to at least make a bridge. Because he's not going to be able to perceive it the way Don Juan does. Don Juan has a different perspective. He's born into culture that has a totally different, view of reality. Right. So,
did Carlos have anything about astrology? Did he have any comments about it? Were you into astrology at the time that he was around?
Well, I'll tell you a couple things. One is, I was really interested in astrology at the time in a way that I was very invested in it, and almost obsessive. Like I would kind of really view the world, and I had to do someone's chart, or I practically couldn't have a conversation. And he gave me a perspective one evening of his travels in the universe. And he would say, as we're considering this section of infinite vastness, and it had a visceral sense to it. He's been there in dreaming states, or however you want to imagine that, and that this is just one place in the vastness. So taking a certain number of planets and a few asteroids and things like that, we can see patterns with that, and we also have to know how fascinating that is, and also how limited it is. Yeah, yeah. So for a while, I just didn't deal with it. And what he encouraged us to do, all of us, let's connect with the stars directly. Right. We have movements and just practices you can do with movement, or you can just set that intention, connect with the earth. If you really want to connect with the stars, connect with the earth and the cycles of the earth. So we're back to this whole thing about connect with nature again. because Earth is a sentient being and traveling with all its relatives, in our solar system and then galaxy and these infinite clusters and all that. So this is our matrix. This is our home. This is where we travel from and return to. Connect there, and then you can look at the stars. You can study the stars, but let's connect energetically. And he also pointed out there's just massive amounts of energy coming from the stars that's not used, that we can let it come into our system and give us a new impulse and kind of wake up some different motion in our being and in our thinking, in our experience. So he would also track certain cycles that would affect his dreaming. But he would encourage you just experiment, explore. And that's one of the things that always made me uncomfortable, but it didn't stop me in my younger, before I started doing tensegrity, was I would call it astrodogma. You look up, okay, you have Venus and Gemini, you are this. And it's like, okay, I know that even the author knows that that's one aspect out of many. But if you look at a chart, it's a real multiplicity of interplay. And that's the fascination. Who's ever going to get on top of that and say what that is? And yet there are certain cultures and systems that it can tell you a lot of patterns. Ultimately, it can tell certain energetics that you're working with, but we have infinite decision within that. How do we respond to those energetic patterns that we're born with? It does seem to affect us, but it's continuously moving. Let's connect with it directly, and notice where you're drawn to. I'm always drawn to Orion.
Oh, yeah?
Orion Nebula. That's my orientation. And I know that that's something that Carlos uses as a point of reference. And it's also a very natural, organic thing for me to connect there. And, it's a place of birth of stars and all that. And it's a definite reference for always evolving, always becoming. And there's also mystery into it. I don't understand totally why I'm drawn there, So it's just an endless exploration. I still explore it, and I also take it with a grain of salt because I know it's a vehicle. It's a focusing device. It's not a final definition of anything. Right.
Are you able to, in dreaming, travel to Orion?
We're all able, yes, but we're all able to do that.
Okay, well, I shouldn't say able. Do you? Or is that too personal?
Yes.
Yeah?
And it's not something I do, every night, but definitely. What can you say? It's
because I want to ask you a bit about dreaming.
I also can go into dreaming and see Orion, but I'm not here looking at Orion. I'm somewhere else looking at Orion. And I think we all can do that, and I think we do. It's just being conscious of it and remembering it. Sometimes we remember, sometimes we don't.
Well, that's what I wanted to explore with you a bit too, because I find in my dreaming, I go through periods where I'm quite clear. I'll wake up. I wake up in my dream. Oftentimes it must be just a shift. It's not a movement because my surroundings are familiar. I don't think I've moved outside of the cocoon, or outside of the energy body, my sandwich point when I'm dreaming. But I seem to go through periods where I do it consistently, and then it's like nothing for months, and it's not like I'm doing anything differently. Do you have the same experiences, or are you at the point now where you're consistent? Or is it still kind of random in a way?
Well, it moves in cycles. And that's the beauty. We talk about astrology and astronomy. It makes us aware of these cycles. There's so many cycles happening, and the moon cycle will affect our dreaming. Just very simple. The season. There's infinite amount of planetary star cycles that could affect that. And that's where it could be interesting to explore individually. Hey, where is Venus rising in the night sky when I'm having certain dreams, or is it in its phase where we don't see it at night? Is it at morning star phase, night star? You can do all sorts of exploration. Just really practical terms. Carlos wasn't dreaming every night. It would go in phases, and he start to identify, and that's his personal thing. But how those cycles ran, he would encourage us to do that. Start to track it. Just get curious about it. Well, one thing that we notice, if we're focusing quite a bit on some kind of project in our daily life, and let's say we're spending extra waking time on it, that's dreaming energy that's going into our waking state. And so when we go to sleep at night, there might not be so much of what we call dreaming or night dreaming, being aware that you're dreaming. If we are, and that's again where we want to get to that silence and that place of not judging, not trying to externalize things, and becoming more conscious of ourselves. But if we're not so conscious of ourselves, we can get pretty noisy. It affects the nervous system. So if we're in sympathetic nervous system overdrive, it's always fight or flight. It's going to be very, very challenging to access that parasympathetic system that allows us to let go and release and relax and to dream also. So a lot of times people will ask, okay, how can I improve my dreaming? It's like, let's look at what you're doing in the day. And are we waking up in the daytime? Do I know that this is a dream? If I'm anticipating a meeting and it's like, oh, Sarah's going to do that thing again. Then I'm getting ready for that. That's the play that I'm preparing. And a lot of times that's what happens. Sarah has her own free will and choice, so who knows? Or, yeah, I really see this working well. That can be what happens. Right. If we really set the intention to cultivate dreaming, I'm going to wake up in dreaming, then we need to set the intention to wake up in the day and recognize we have choice. This isn't happening to us. Right. Another teacher who a lot of what he has a lot of wisdom is Thich Nhat Hanh, and he talks about interbeing. We enter are. But to recognize that as a high state of consciousness, and for me that would be one way to say waking up in the dream, is really in a practical way, seeing how my thoughts affect yours and yours affect mine, and what you are doing over there is affecting what I'm doing over here. It's back to the grocery store. If I'm going in with one state, it's affecting the whole thing. That's waking up in the daily world. And you will naturally find yourself, whatever it is you want to do. Some people are like, okay, I need to find my hands, or realize that I'm in my dreaming state so that I don't have to keep trying to walk down the street. I can start moving in that floating state, that the energy being. That, and one of the first meetings I had with Florinda Donner Grau, Carlos's colleague, she said that's it. I was telling her about a couple of dreams where I realized it was a dream, and something's chasing me, and I can turn and say, hey, I had dogs and spiders chasing me. I used to be afraid of both of them. Now I have a little thing playing here, and spiders are my friends. I don't hang out with them, if it doesn't need to be like right next to me, but they're doing what they do. They have a consciousness. But I was able to, I turn and recognize, hey, spider that's chasing me around, hey, cut it out. Spider goes like this. And in the daily world, spiders really never bothered me again. And I wasn't thinking, hey, I need to solve this spider issue. But Florinda, I was telling her this in an early meeting, and she goes, that's it. That's the whole point. It's right there. That you recognize that you are in a dream and that you can act. So here in this daily world, we are in a dream and we can act. You know, we're not oppressed. It can look that way. And we're not needing to get on top of somebody to be okay either, although we think that too, you know. I'm going to finally show her or him, you know. Finally, they're gonna listen to me, you know. They may never listen to you.
You know, I've had some cool information coming to me from various people I've been speaking to, and one of the ones I was mentioning about the dialectics, reconciling dialectics. To me, it's tensegrity. It's just another way of tensegrity, is that there's these forces of expansion and contraction, right? We all feel it. I mean, it's the law of the universe in this attention. It's also, we all feel it. The contraction is whenever we do this, you know, this, and the expansion is this. We all know that feeling too. So I guess it's finding that tensegrity, that balance between those two forces.
It is.
And that's, I guess that's that little balancing act on the pin that, you know, that everybody aspires to, of that walking that tightrope of between these forces.
Yeah, it is. And again, it's like we enter our. It's relational. So that happens inside our being, and it happens in that being, you know, among. Right. Rather than subject object, you know, Democratic, Republican, black, white, good, bad, right. You know, intelligent, stupid, whatever we want to do. It's like, no, it's all one. It's all, and again, if we look, hey, if everybody in the dream is you, what does that bring to you? It's a very different, for me, whenever I stop to do that, it's really slows down the complaint. It slows down the feeling of needing to escape from that situation, or let's get rid of that person. Hey, let's just acknowledge. It's more about acknowledgement, you know, of what is. Then we can go somewhere.
Right. You can breathe into it as opposed to, you know.
Yeah. And I like what you're saying when we get into this contraction, and that's one of the things that, you know, tensegrity addresses. We see a lot of people are in we can get in very contracted states, or part of our bodies really carry a lot of tension, and that our awareness corresponds with that. It's, you know, as many people have been saying over the last, you know, few decades, the body and mind are not separate. Our perception can't be separate from that. So it's about embodiment also. And that's a key. It's like we want to talk about things in the abstract, but if we're walking around really tense about, you know, being defensive or offended, we're going to keep seeing things that offend us and make us tense, because that's the vibrational place we are, but it's also the embodiment. They go together. And so that's what we see. And so, you know, when somebody describes, again, such a great example, the whole election and all the mudslinging that's going on, and some of it really outlandish, you know, stuff that's coming up. One of our teachers, Carol Teague's colleague of Castaneda, is like, that just makes me really curious about the speaker. When you want to get into these outlandish accusations about others and the things that you choose, it'll tell you about where your focus is. And there was this film, it was probably 20 years ago, about Jacques Derrida, the thinker. He's French-Algerian. He was in New York, and some of his students wanted to make a documentary, and it was really interesting. And at one point, one of the interviewers asked him, "Hey, what do you think about this documentary? What do you think it's going to be like? Do you think it's going to really illustrate you?" And he said, "No, it's going to illustrate you." And to me, the integrity of the filmmakers to put that in there and to see that and capture that. That was the core of the film for me.
Yeah.
And because it's still relevant, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
What you see on one level, you know, and the kids will be like, you know, I'm rubber, you're glue. You're glue. Whatever you say about me bounces off to you. Or I know you are, but what am I? That's another. I know you are, but what am I?
Yeah.
There's some truth to it.
Yeah, totally.
You know.
Yeah.
So. We're going to be exploring this topic. I don't know if I'm in Omega Institute, and I wanted to make sure to mention that. We're going to get to do a 5-day retreat in Rhinebeck where we get into dreaming and the art of dreaming, and what are we doing during the day, and how can we adjust some of that so that we can and wake up and recognize when we're sleeping that it's a dream. So we'll do some exercises together. That's in July 9th through 15th.
And where is that?
It's in Rhinebeck, New York at the Omega Institute, which is, we were there. That's one of the earliest workshops that we did. And then we've been able to come back recently. We were there last year and we're going to be there this coming year. It's just a really wonderful place because it's all this multiplicity of views and perspectives, people seeking consciousness who are coming together with this idea of a university of consciousness. It's very exciting.
Well, that seems to be something that's going on a lot these days. Is bringing this out to more and more people, whatever it is, whatever somebody has to share to expand consciousness. It seems to be coming down to this level.
Yeah, and when we say down to this level, it's like bringing it into our practical experience rather than, that's just airy-fairy or whatever.
So that's one thing else I kind of wanted to talk with you about, which I mentioned in the email a bit, is this that, I talked to a whole bunch of people that have, they seem to be the top of their pyramids, right? They're the ones spreading the gospel to their people, but they don't seem to be a lot of crossover between different people. And I'm always curious about why, because I've tried to get like a group of people together, like a Tom Campbell. Do you know who Tom Campbell is? My Big Toe, My Big Theory of Everything. He's a physicist that's actually he's got the same perspective as you have, but it's coming from like kind of a physics perspective with spirit mixed in there. So I always thought it would be kind of cool to have all these people that kind of see the world the same way from a different perspective, the diversity, and to have them intermingle, because I think just intermingling is a powerful thing. That's my even just our talking to me is powerful. For me, that's what I feel. I mean, it might be,
I agree with you 100%. I think you're obviously an agent of this, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what you do and what you set up. But I agree with you, and to me, that's part of the excitement of our times is knowledge and the amount of knowledge that's available to us. Yeah. And separating knowledge from information. We could go on information overload. There's some knowledge that we can access, and I think it is a wonderful time for what do we call leaders to get together. And for us, we can look at it as a pyramid. For us, we use the term facilitators, that we are, and the people that we're training to lead tensegrity classes and things like that. We've got about 200 people now, I think. They're in facilitator training, because it's about facilitating the awareness that we naturally have. We can cultivate it, we can grow it, but it's our inner voice that we need to hear that's connected with the infinite, with that greater consciousness. And I think it's just a really very exciting, and I can feel it when you talk about it too. I think that's the way I would like to look at it with you, is that something that's just beginning, that we're just now stepping into an era. I think we can really, I think it's been going on. Some places are doing, conferences and things like that. That's been going on for a while, but I think we can go even deeper into that. And you always learn something. I always learn something talking to you. And I would love to participate in things, and I would love to see that happening more.
Awesome. Yeah.
You know, the times that I do see it, there's this beautiful conversation between Clarissa Pinkola Estes and Carolyn Mace. I heard one time, you know, very inspiring. There's just a lot of different conversations that can take place and new things that can develop out of that. Yeah, and I think that is something that we need to do.
Awesome. That's where I feel compelled to go. And that was my whole reason for doing this. I was trying to connect with human beings on the planet, trying to find human beings. You know what I mean? Like, I don't find too many in my daily life, as strange as, I don't mean to sound, anyways, you know what I'm saying, I think. I'm trying to find people who can capture the moment together. And it'd be wonderful to have a network of people that could do that, which is what you're doing with Tensegrity, right? You're trying to find that spark that everybody shares and grow it.
Absolutely.
Right? So people,
absolutely.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
For me, the facilitators, a lot of the facilitators that I've spoken with, from my ears, they've all got pieces of the puzzle that, boy, when it all comes together, it's just awesome. But, you know, they've got a piece of the puzzle, and I try to see if they're curious about this piece of the puzzle, because I think that they would be, and it would add to their piece of the puzzle. But oftentimes, I find a bit like we all do, we hold on to what we have as our identity, and because we've created a whole world around that they have so many people depending on their knowledge that they've got all the answers, that there's a bit of crust or resistance to spreading it out in a way beyond their paradigm that they've created for themselves, if that makes sense. And it always seems to me, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, it just always seems to me a shame, because it's like, you know, like there's so much, like you say, knowledge that people are bringing out to spread, that has been hidden for so long, or whether it's personally hidden or hidden in their societies, that I think that if little bits of information that I get from you, or I get from Jose Luis Parise or Michael Krellman, it adds to my expansive understanding of everything, which I believe, and I think you believe, every bit of expansion expands.
It does. And that's what's so much fun when the first time we talked, and I got the privilege of looking at all the different interviews you're doing, it's setting a kind of collective intent. It's happening there, maybe not direct conversations, but the fact that you're interviewing everybody. But I think that's definitely a wave that we could get on that would be really, really fruitful. And that's what I was saying about Omega. I'm so excited about being there. I mean, we were there in the fall. I'll be teaching with my colleague, Teo Alfaro, who also, he founded a wolf conservancy that also works with youth, and the kids get to know a wolf story, and that helps them better learn their story, because those wolves all have stories about how they got to this. It's a very beautiful thing. And we were kind of blown away. We walk into the faculty dining room the first night, and it just starts from there, of meeting all these amazing teachers. We had, there's a group called the Indigenous Grandmothers, these amazing beings. And Teo had met one of them on a journey that they had done throughout the country. And it was like a reunion. And then, this person knew this friend, and this person was reflecting on what we wrote, and then we were reflecting on what they said. And it was a really rich experience. Jean Houston was there, and we got to meet one of her colleagues that's working with her, and they're looking at dreaming from a different perspective. And I think that's an opportunity that we have now. Why some people will be curious and some not, I'm sure everybody, there's diversity within that, how people want to participate in that too. But it's definitely something that makes sense with Tensegrity. Again, coming back to that tension and release, that the flexible elements make the structure, that we can look at different points of view and really be richer for the experience. And again, the context, it helps I've, you see certain lessons that you were taught through seeing someone else doing it another way, and then, okay, it becomes deeper, it becomes richer. So I'm 100% with you on that.
Well, it sounds like you're already putting that into practice.
Well, it's a beginning. It's been going on for a little while. I mean, we're doing it. We do events at Wolf Connection sometimes too. So we're bringing tensegrity and this other. There's a whole community around the Wolf Conservancy, and there's a compatibility there that teaches both of us something. Also, I mean, certainly working with volunteers that day in and day out are working with wolves. I don't want to say handling, but then you learn stuff about human behavior too, right? And but when you're right there, direct hands on, it really wakes you up. There's certain wolves that you can't put in the compound with another wolf. There's major politics in the wolf world, and it's so interesting. It's like, we want to have this fantasy. Well, only humans. No, there's some elements in the animal, among the wolves, but they're handling it differently, and they're not talking to themselves in the same way. I mean, it's a much more pure expression. They're not hampered by certain things that could be our advantage or our disadvantage. But you get to see yourself. Oh, okay, sometimes it's just or wolf has to learn to trust. Sometimes if the first human they were with wasn't so nice to them, they have to learn too, and then it shows us. So just in that simple way, everybody's richer. We've done events. There's a guy named Howard Crowhurst we went to Carnac, France, and he's an expert. He came to the seminar. He's good friends with one of our instructors, Nyei Murez, in France, and we had a workshop at Carnac, and Howard talked about the alignments of Carnac and the cycles and the seasons and the connections amongst all these stones and what we can imagine or know of the culture that it came from, and it really enriched our experience, with tensegrity, which also comes from a very ancient tradition, and it's ultimately helping us. I mean, in that one, it's really helping us understand that we do have this ancestral wisdom inside of us, and that stones aren't just stones. They're not these things that we just move around. They can hold consciousness, and they can hold energies, and they can ground energies, and they're very profound what they are. So there's a lot of, things that we've done, but to me, I would really love to do more of that.
Cool.
And I really find it really exciting to see where is the common ground.
Cool.
Yeah, and everybody learns.
Yeah. Awesome.
So, and there will be affinities amongst certain things that naturally come together. But there's some of the people that you're interviewing, I know they're already doing a lot of that. Like Marianne Williamson is interfacing with Deepak Chopra and a lot of that type of stuff. And everybody is better off, aren't they?
I think so. Totally.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to seeing what gets birthed with your vision on this. Yeah. And I'll look forward to seeing what happens this year too, when we get to go to that one of those university centers to me in Rhinebeck.
Yeah.
It also reminds me, when we look at this lineage that tensegrity comes from, one of the places that people will congregate, visit in the world is Teotihuacan. And that was really a university of consciousness. It was a dreaming university. People were coming, in its height there were many different languages, many different cultures, coming together to share their knowledge.
Wow.
So,
is there a heaviness there at all? Is there the old sorcerer's mood there at all, or does it depend on the mood that you go there with?
I think would depend. I mean, I'm not going to speak as the authority on what the energy is there. I can tell you what I felt and others have felt. Mexico in a way will heighten, places like that will heighten the mood that you bring. So it will depend a lot on the mood you bring, but so does anything else. It maybe just sometimes is more obvious in places like that. And what we also see, and we can have humor about it, but there's this long avenue that they would call the Avenue of the Dead. And Carlos said that's a better name. Don Juan was like, it's really the Avenue of the Dreamers, because these beings would they really did go into what he called another attention. They pooled their intent together. They would gaze at this pyramid, and each one has a different view of it, and they would go into another attention. And occasionally there might be people that leave there's a little part of them left behind, and the anthropologist comes along and says, oh, this is really dark and death. And it's like, no, they were dreaming. There's so many things that you can say about that place, but to me, it's a very inspiring place to be, and the expansiveness of it, and the richness, and the many layers of culture, knowledge, discovery. It's very inspiring. It's very awakening, very opening.
I've never been there.
What?
I've never been to that one. I've been to Chichen Itza and Palenque, but I've never been to Teotihuacan. I always get that messed up.
Teotihuacan. Yeah, and ultimately, again, what's the most inspiring to me is that diversity of knowledge, bringing the different views together. And like you said, when people will actually take another point of view, something new gets born.
Right.
So they were really studying, very systematically, knowledge, meaning including knowledge of what we call our ability to connect with our dreaming body, connect our physical, energetic body, this vehicle, with the pure energy body. Right. They would say that's complete perception. That sometimes people think, we want to just go into the dreaming body and float around, or we get overly concrete and it's like, this is all there is. No, it's that merging and that meeting point that is where new things can get born. Like you say, bringing it down here, that's the opportunity that we have. Right. And it's just been, it's been heightened greatly with what's going on. So that's the opportunity, that the urgency to find that blending. So.
Awesome.
Yes, it is awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much.
That seems like the perfect ending for our conversation. Thank you. Really, it's a pleasure to connect with you.
It's a real pleasure to connect with you, and I really appreciate the invitation. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes next with your vision of collaboration.
Well, it feels like 2017 is going to be an interesting year. It feels to me like possibilities are right there, and the energy is there to grab them. I'm hoping this is going to be, this is going to be an awesome year for me. I'm sure of it.
There you go.
And and thank you for your encouragement and your positive words.
Thank you. Yeah, very inspiring.
I'm always awkward with goodbyes, so that's why I'm bumbling here.
Really grateful.
Thank you so much.
See you soon. Thank you.
Okay.